it's been.
We're gonna get going, everybody.
Electrical gears.
Pledge
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The roll call, please, Amy.
Mr. Rennies,
Present?
Mr. Bova, Mr. Brodsky,
Present.
Mr. Coyne,
Here.
Mr. D'Elia,
Here.
Mr. Ford,
Present.
Mr. Haskell,
Here.
Mr. Karam,
Here.
Mr. Miola,
Present.
Mr. Santa Croce, and Ms. Sesney.
Here.
Thank you.
You have the draft May 20, 2024 minutes in your packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thanks. Couple of seconds there and there. Any deletions, additions, corrections? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. First item on our agenda, award of a contract. Are you doing this one?
Yep.
Yes. This resolution's for the award of a contract for the replacement of our asphalt shingle roofs at our Cider Street, Toggletown, Valley View, and Christensen Road pump stations to SJBS Construction out of Utica, New York, in the low bid amount of $32,800. We successfully procured this project, bid it, and received 3 qualified bidders. They were the lowest of the 3. Any questions?
We worked with them before?
We have not, but we called on references and we got good feedback.
That was the same question, but how low were they compared to number two?
That was my second question.
They were $32,800. The second lowest bidder was EV Roofing, and they were $38,600, so about $6,000 difference. And then our high bid was $58,000, so $26,000 higher.
Who was that? I
Pulver Roofing, and we do use Pulver on occasion. So
Anything else, Denny?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Any other questions for Dan regarding this? Someone care to Bruce, is that it? Is there a second? Thanks, Rich. Any further comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Committee reports, Jim.
Maybe just get the
Presentation.
What did I skip?
Presentation.
Oh, the audit. I was trying to, I think.
Yes,
Jim?
we have BST out of Albany, New York, that did our audit this year. He's gonna give a brief presentation. This is Jeremy DeVar. He's with BST, your associate with them. So he's gonna give a brief presentation. I think you have your report with you. Everyone have, looks like this. You just received them, but it's online. It's been online for the last 2 months. We did our filing, which is required, for the Authority Budget Office. That was done back in March, so this report was part of that filing, so, this is already, the State Controller's Office already has it, but, Jeremy's here to do a brief presentation.
Fair enough. Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I'm Jared Barr, Jeremy, Senior Manager at BST. Just kind of give you a brief overview. If anyone has any questions at any point, feel free to let me know. Start. We completed all our audit work in February 24. Our basic deliverables, we have the basic financial statements, which is this packet here. We have a report on control. Here is our, included within this is our report on internal controls and compliance, which is our gas report under government auditing standards. We also have the single individual page you have here is report on compliance related to your investments. And then the stapled packet is your communication letter to those charged with governance, required communications as part of our audit. And there were, your federal expenditures were below the threshold, so there was no single audit this year. For the our financial statement audit, there was an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion. It's the highest opinion we can offer. That we didn't have any findings material to the financial statements. The report on internal control, which is so the opinion is on page 3 of your packet. And then the that gas report on control and internal controls is on the last 2 pages of your packet here, the bound copy. And that report also is a clean opinion. We didn't find any issues or material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in your internal controls or compliance related to those. And then just as part of our audit, we reviewed significant transactions, capital assets, our cash and investments revenue, as well as other significant areas. Through that process, we didn't, like I said, we didn't have any findings or concerns. Looks like your processes and controls are functioning properly. Your transactions are adequately supported. And it was a pleasure to work with your staff, Jim and his staff, throughout the audit process. We'd like to thank them for their efforts. And then your examination investment compliance, similar. We completed a certain set of tests to verify the compliance and didn't have any findings. And then we also have your in your required communications letter, which is this document, stapled document here. There were no unusual transactions or disagreements of any kind, no issues encountered with management. And there were no significant new standards or anything like that. We do have a minor uncorrected misstatement related to the cutoff of accounts receivable, and that's in the page 5. But nothing of concern.
It's not in the bound copy. It's a separate document.
It's in the letter, the stapled letter here.
So what was specifically that you found in accounts receivable?
It was related to the cutoff of accounts receivable. So, their billing. What was that? Date cutoff. Yes. So the billings are through December of 2023, and those are billed for the 3 months prior. So there were billings after year end that relate to the 2023 calendar year that theoretically should have been accrued. And then on the reason why it's not significant is on the back end, you have those similar accruals. So we're essentially including the wrong 12 months, but there's no significant impact on the income statement. There's a minor impact on the balance sheet, but it nets to zero essentially.
It's just a rolling 12 months. So it's the same 12-month period from start to finish every year. It just doesn't coincide with the calendar.
What was the difference? You remember the number?
There, the change to the asset would be 500,000, and the change to liability would be approximately the same number. So there's no net impact on the income statement.
All right, thank you.
We're not gonna change it because we will do it that way and it works.
I'm good with it. As long as it ends up the same way, it's fine with me.
And then we also reviewed any significant accounting estimates. These are also listed on page, where are they? On page 4. 2 of them are provided by third-party actuaries. These are based on assumptions and other factors provided by New York State, and then our actuary for the other post-employment benefits. These have kind of a minimal impact on your current financial focus, but they are pretty big numbers that appear on your balance sheet. The other 2 are allowance for uncollectible receivables and depreciation are pretty standard estimates, but we list them here and kind of give a brief description. And we thought those estimates are reasonable based on our understanding. We didn't have any issues with those. And then there are a couple standards. new standards, there was a GASB 96, which relates to subscription-based IT arrangements, which did not impact the financial statements. There were no material arrangements of that kind. And then there is one effective for next year, which may or may not have an effect. We don't anticipate it having a significant effect. That's GASB 101 for compensated absences. Does anyone have any questions?
So essentially, you're determining this a clean audit.
Yes. Clean opinion, clean audit. We did not have any findings of any sort. No material weakness, deficiencies, and an unmodified opinion, which is the highest we can offer.
Do you have any comments, Jim?
No, I think it went very well this week.
Great.
Good job.
Yeah, Jim, good job.
Thank you.
And good job for checking them. Yeah,
Steph does the work.
it ain't easy.
Carolyn does all the work.
I did ask Jim to consider in a future board meeting what was mentioned earlier regarding estimates made regarding certain types of current and future expenditures. Net pension liability, uncollectibles, depreciation, and post-employment benefits, when they leave and they get money. We estimate a certain amount. Staff uses certain processes. I've asked Jim to consider at a future board meeting, like we've been doing with charting, but to talk about how do we do that? This is the regulation, and this is what we do to comply, because they have a big impact on the balance sheet, but they also have an impact on cash in the future. So decisions that the board makes regarding benefits or decisions that the government or uncollectibles and decisions that the government makes about what we can or cannot do with the money, those estimates have an impact, even though we might not see it in this next budget year, we'll see it in future years when you make decisions as a board. These are important ones, and I've asked them to do a presentation just on that, on how they make their estimates.
Well, estimates are something that they're educated to do. What's the actuals at the end of the year is what we need to work
But
with.
they impact what those actuals are, and what you vote on for the rate increase, and why you vote on certain rate increases. So it's just a little more education for the board, so that when you make decisions, you have more information.
And I think with the graphs and charts thing, the theory behind that is to provide all the board members more information that's in these big documents, but there's so many numbers in here that it's mind-boggling at times. So I'm trying to piece off these different things, and kind of goes into the next section of the graphs and charts. I'm trying to provide you with some of this information that you're aware of, but you don't see it by itself. And once you do, it kind of poses additional questions for you. So I'm trying to gear you up towards the budget process, so you have that information. We talked about the bonding last week. I think there's a chart in there this week on the pilot payments. And that's interesting to everybody, because those are some of the large costs that go into our budget. And so by themselves, it's interesting to look at and see how they come about.
How does the pilot program work with, in other words, businesses don't pay water?
No.
Here's this chart, which is
Well, how
in the
does the
pack.
pilot program, I thought it just was taxes.
These are, this was part of the original legislation.
When the system was regionalized and taken over by the authority as a public authority,
Yeah.
it became a non-taxable entity, or tax-exempt entity.
Yep.
When the system was owned by the city of Utica,
It was,
the city had to pay taxes for piping and other facilities that were outside the city limits. That all became tax exempt at the time. In order for everyone to agree to accept the formula and do the regionalization, there were pilot schedules proposed so that we weren't blowing a hole in local budgets where they were used to getting tax revenue, where suddenly they would get zero. So school districts got phased out and zeroed out over 22 years or something like that. In the end, and then we still pay pilots to towns and villages where there's facilities owned out there that we own. And then there's one to the city and there's one to the county. Those are the two largest. And those go on indefinitely unless somebody wants to change it.
And the odd.
Yeah, well, the one to the county is the auditorium.
Yeah.
It's a pass-through from the county, but it supports the auditorium.
That was when originally the sold system, city did, we got a certain amount, we broke it down.
so then they made these other, they gave pilot programs for their water bill. Is that what they did?
Well, it's pilots that we pay to the towns in,
Yeah. Okay.
where they used to pay taxes to those towns on taxable facilities.
Okay.
They became tax exempt.
No, some
Pardon?
of it was new. Some
Yeah.
of it was-
Well, yeah, but for the most part, it was just to protect these towns from having their budgets,
Yeah.
lose a ton of revenue. Otherwise, they wouldn't have agreed to the regionalization.
It's $1,000,003.
Well, we'll see if we can make some money on pilots.
Are we done with this audit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dick.
Jeremy, thank you very much. We
Yeah,
appreciate
thank
it.
you, appreciate it.
May's monthly financial report. So as of May, consumption, good news, we are back to the level we were last year. So if you will recall, in the prior months, we were down 1.8% 2 months ago, 0.8% a month ago. Now we're back even to last year. So hopefully in the coming months, consumption will rise above or at least stay the same because we budgeted that way. Water sales, we are $600,000 year to date more than last year, which is good. We are a couple $100,000 below our budget. So we had a little recovery this past month. So anticipate that we can get back up to budget levels. And cash flow, we had a little recovery, $50,000 to the good. We still are below overall year to date. We're down $400,000. So hopefully in the months coming, we can catch up there because we're going to need that money to pay some bills in the later months of the year. So overall, I think it was a good month, and year to date, I think we're getting back on track.
Debt service.
Debt service is fixed. We know that ahead of time, so we're paying it as it goes along. What's that? Yeah, it doesn't change.
I do want to add a couple of things. You haven't, the charts that you got have the chart on the,
Well, go into the charts.
not into detail. I just wanted to point out, we have those charts that show you the pilot payments, show you the history of the rate increases. Yeah, show you the increases in the rate increases. This was also on the, what was sent to you, right? And the
Miscellaneous.
miscellaneous. And then monthly and quarterly problem consumptions. Some of them is a problem, but
Yes.
monthly and quarterly.
Provide you
consumption.
with the top 20 of the past year, both quarterly and monthly, just to take a look at. Here are our top users, consumption-wise and revenue-wise. Couple things to point out. Obviously, number one, Wolfspeed, large user. The United County Sewer used to be our number one, and because of their efficiencies and all the production they've had over there, all the construction, they've dropped down considerably over the years. So we have our colleges, the hospital. This year, obviously, or 2023, you don't see MVHS in there because they were just starting up. So I anticipate you're going to see them next year. You'll see St. Luke's and St. Elizabeth kind of go away. St. Luke's will have a little left over, but St. Elizabeth will go away.
Was there a pilot program for the new hospital?
No, we're not, we don't have pilots where we're collecting from them.
Okay.
The towns, the school district.
Yeah, right. We don't collect money through that. It's money we pay.
Like from us.
Doesn't go the other way.
So if you have any questions, I can answer on the top 20. I looked at this and I said, we're SUNY, because it's because they have multiple accounts, and either we combine those accounts together to give you a picture, whereas some of these other colleges and they have they're under one or two accounts, but these are separate accounts. So apparently they have 4 or 5 different accounts.
I did want to point out one other thing, and that's because it's a concern I have as we go into the next year, and I think the board should be aware of it. One of the charts that, first, I want to thank, the staff has been working very hard to try and create some of this charting from, as you remember from the last meeting, the new charts, and give you a much better idea of the trends related to the spending, revenue. One of the new ones is on, in the financial report. It's the one with all the charts. And the one on the bottom, they clarified the volume subtotals. So for example, you can see in the water consumption in May brought the total for the year to 1.7, then 0.0000000, right? You go back, you'll see in 2021, it was 1.741 compared to 1.753. So it's a little bit more. You go back a few more years, it's 1.876. So the consumption, this is what is worrying me, and I think it's going to affect the board decision on rates as we're coming up. Our total consumption, 5 months of the year, 8 years back to today, is going down. We are balancing the budget on rate increases. The rate increases, which we had kept in the 2%, then went to 4%, and then went to 6% this year. We can't balance the budget on rate increases. At least, as one board member, I won't do that. But the problem is consumption is, no matter what is going on, we're getting more people in the community, we're getting more businesses, but the community is also getting more efficient in how it does things. And the volume of water that used to be there for some of our major customers, if they had stayed, I wouldn't have this conversation. They didn't. We lost a lot. And the result of that is our consumption is not keeping up with our need by any stretch of the imagination, which will affect decisions we have to make on staffing, on spending, on rates in the next 3 to 5 years. Again, with this year coming up, it's an issue. And I think the board has to ask as many questions as it needs to ask, like it's doing now. Board members have to ask questions and be satisfied with the answers. We have the best staff in this area. I don't think I've known a lot of authorities, I've read a lot about them. We have the best staff of any authority or government unit that I know. They're experts, they know what they're doing, and they provide what this community needs. But it's costing us more. And these next 3 to 5 years, I think, are going to be particularly an issue if that number doesn't change. It'd be 1 trillion, right? 1.8 trillion water consumption, cubic feet in 2018, which is now for the first 5 months, 1.735 trillion. That's less. How are we getting more revenue? Because it's rate increases. That's a problem. It's a bigger problem because we can't have a 700-year replacement schedule for our pipes. We can't have a 700-year replacement schedule for our pipes. That is not feasible. We have to keep that in mind, and we're trying to. The staff are trying to. But every time we look at adding another $1 million do 1 mile, think about that. We should be doing 10 miles a year. We can't. It's going to be an issue. And we're going to be hit with some big federal regulation over the next 3 years related to lead, without any idea of how much the feds are going to provide in funding. And my guess is, based on national debt and administration in Congress and the presidency, we're not going to see the money that we're going to need, but we're going to see the regulation that forces us to do it. We're going to have to make some hard decisions. There's going to be issues. Read this stuff. The charts are going to help. The staff is doing a great job on giving you charts to see trends and where the numbers are. Look at those things and ask questions. It's a problem. It's a problem.
Jim, do you have anything more on these charts? I would just point out one thing, that I'd like to move the number 3 biggest, the Matt Brewing Company. If we all drink more beer, we can put that thing up. Just
I agree.
pointing that out.
Yeah.
All right, Ellis, I'd
Yes.
just like to make one comment. I know Bruce and I always have a disagreement on this, but raising rates is what you have to do to keep the system operational. I know it seems hard to do, but on the other hand, if you would take a household budget, you would find that water is the cheapest thing in your household budget and the most important thing in your household budget. And you have to keep that in mind when you talk about keeping the system where it ought to be. I just want to have the board reflect on that. I know
No,
Bruce
you're
and I
absolutely
always go
No,
across.
we argue about it, but it's just.
Because our rates have never, ever
Yeah.
been at the level to support our needs.
No.
Every budget we do,
Right.
those rates are far below what it is we need to really operate.
Absolutely true, yeah, and I wish everybody would look at their household budget and say, water is the cheapest, but you will turn that faucet on and if no water comes out, you get really
Yes,
ticked
get a lot
off and you
pissed
want to
when that
call
happens.
somebody and raise hell. Okay, enough of my talk.
It's just you just need to be, I voted for every rate increase, no matter what the
We're
amount
gonna
was.
have all this
Yeah.
full discussion
I just
as we
want
get
people
into
to
the
learn.
budget season.
Yeah.
I just got a question. Do you guys correlate with the city streets? I mean,
Oh,
if you
yeah.
want to start doing your projects, just put all the new lines in when they're doing the streets.
They try.
do, yeah.
You do?
Yeah,
The city, the county, the state,
we.
Everybody, when you, so in other words, every street that they pave, you guys are putting
Well,
pipe.
paving is,
No,
but they have to go down.
Well, you do a few of them, right?
Where they're needed.
Very quickly, we work closely with the city, the county, and the state. They give us their street reconstruction program for the following year. We then look at those mains to see what kind of shape they're in. If there's frequent breaks, they're unreliable. We try to target that if we can. We build it into their contract. The main will get put in. We don't have to pay for the restoration. We save money. It works great. But there's a lot more street being redone than we can afford to do for water mains. So we pick and choose very carefully where we spend the money.
It's 700 miles of pipe. They don't do 700 miles of streets every year.
Nice.
And the price of pipe went up 40% in the last 3 years.
It's,
So it's very costly.
They have to do something with the shut-offs, right, in the streets? For what, the water shut-offs in the streets? You gotta elevate them or move them down, so,
Oh, they just, no, when they're repaving the street, they just raise it a couple inches if they're increasing the asphalt. We give them what they call risers. It's just they shove it on the
that's all they
box.
do?
That's all it is.
But they do it, and the great one is the state. The state is very cooperative. They pay for stuff.
We did 2 of those last year.
Yeah, they-
Champlain Ave and Upper Genesee.
we like the state.
Yeah.
they do it when they're being
You
watched.
put the money
Yeah,
up
they want
front.
the cash up front, but it's cheaper. We get a lot back.
When they're
Thank
being
you for
watched,
answering my question.
then they do it.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
sometimes they'll go right over
Yeah,
it.
it's
In the miscellaneous section,
Yes.
there are 2 policies which have to be reaffirmed: Code of Ethics and Surplus Property Disposition Policy. Have these changed from the previous years, Pat?
I don't believe either of those 2 are changing. The third one that was listed, we're pulling back to make some changes, so it'll come back to the board at a later date. And the one that says investment guidelines.
Yes.
Oh, it's not in your new, okay, I'm sorry. It's still in mine.
Hold it.
Okay. Yeah, so these, as we've talked about before, under the Public Authority Reform Act, we have to bring all these policies back every year for reaffirmation to the board. These 2 tonight come out of our accounting department. They're financial in nature as opposed to personnel or IT, et cetera. The Code of Ethics and the Surplus Property Distribution, Disposition Policy, are virtually unchanged. So they're the same ones that the board has passed the last several years in a row.
Any questions regarding these? A motion to affirm both of them?
I'll make a motion.
Thanks. Thanks, Rich. Any further comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Pat?
Very quickly, once again, Hinckley Reservoir still remains a concern to us. It is still 5.5 feet below average right now. There is some rain expected later in the week over the watershed. Maybe that'll make a little difference. I'm not sure. But it's roughly 2 feet below what's known as the elevation trigger, which requires communication. So Dan and Phil and I have been doing weekly calls with the Canal Corporation and the Power Authority, monitoring the level. Right now, there isn't really any adjustment being made to the outflow. It's still at a pretty good 12, 17 and a half elevation. Is more water than we need to operate, but it's later in August, it could become a concern. But over time, as it's supposed to naturally drop, we should catch up with the elevation trigger and it should be coming full into the normal elevation range. I just mentioned it in case, you drive up there and it looks a little low for this time of year. It is a little low, but we're watching it very carefully. Another thing I was going to mention, I thought I was being proactive this morning when I sent instructions out to the staff. I wanted to discontinue water shutoffs for non-payments this week. I don't want to turn water off on someone when it's 97 degrees outside. Lo and behold, as luck would have it, we didn't have any scheduled this week anyway. So
Very good.
we're not doing it. But in case you're wondering, if you go home at night and you go, God, it's hot. I hope they're not shutting the water off on anybody. That's not happening this week. The earliest we'll do that
Time to shut.
could be next week, depending on the weather. Wednesday night, June 5th at 6 o'clock, Dan Falzinski and I went to the New Hartford Town Board. I had been requested to see if we could stop in up there, say had some questions about extending some water mains. Also about fire coverage, distance between hydrants and stuff from the chief, former Chief Reynolds. So Dan is working with his staff to try to develop some basic information that they can use to do some planning purposes. But it does sound like at least New Hartford is interested in doing a little bit of main extension and adding some additional customers. So not going to make up what we're seeing, but every little bit helps. But I think we had a good meeting. They also said that they're very pleased with the new paving contractor that we brought on board this year, who's new for us this year. They're based in Watertown, but they acquired a lot of local equipment and talent when they bought out a local company. So far they're doing a good job, as reported by the highway superintendent up there. So kudos is a bad word. There's another company. But good job to Dan and his department for monitoring these folks. Another thing I wanted to mention, speaking of the budget, is within 60 days or so, Jim and his team will be preparing the budget packets that'll be going out to our departments. So within 90 days, we'll be talking with all of you about the next draft budget and what it's going to do to the rates, et cetera. The only comment I'll make real quickly is that 20 years ago, when we did our revenue forecasts, the number we used was estimated about 80,000 gallons per year per household, average household. That number is now down to 55,000 gallons and continuing to drop over the years. So even with the same population, as people renovate houses, put in water saver toilets, more water efficient dishwashers, washing machines, etc., the average household use has been dropping steadily over the years. And that's a big part of the problem that Bruce was talking about, and also referenced by Mr. Coyne as well. So that'll all come to light when we bring our first cut at the draft budget back in just a couple of months. I was also going to mention that you probably have seen in the news and have heard from time to time from us that there are some local apartment buildings that continually fall behind on the water bill. Some of the ones in question are owned by out-of-state entities. It's like trying to draw blood out of a stone to get money from them. I will point out, however, when those bills are not paid, there's usually, if they're inside the city of Utica, they get Utica sewer charges that aren't getting paid, as well as county sewer charges that aren't getting paid. The burden seems to fall only on us to try to collect from them. If we have to shut the water off, it opens up a whole new can of worms because you got to relocate hundreds of residents. There's no place to put them, etc. So I've reached out to a number of folks, both at the city level with the mayor and the county executive and state representatives. I'm trying to assemble a task force to sit down and work out standing plans on how we would go about shutting off water if we needed to, which departments need to be involved in the relocation process, etc. Also, a system of early warning indicators so that if we see some financial distress early on, we can all convene and start planning rather than being reactive in emergency mode. So, so far, it looks like I have good participation in that first meeting, which is going to be this Thursday afternoon over at the county office building. So stand by on that. Hopefully we'll be able to take, we call it the 80-20 rule. In this case, it's more like 90-10. The 80-20 rule is that 80% of your activities dealt with 20% of your problem customers. It's probably more like 90-10 for us. But if we can start to clean up the collections and figure out a way to get some of these properties into local hands to people that are more responsive and care about the community, a lot of our work will go away. And, you know, and I are always constantly trying to figure out who do we call and how do we get them to pay the bills. So I want to try to stop that cycle once and for all and intervene if we can. So I'll keep you posted. Last thing I want to mention is we were talking about Hinkley Reservoir, and it's a little low this year, but it's been reliable. The proof is right here. This was an article that was donated to us by Joe Gazal, who worked here for 42 years, I think, just retired. But he happened to find us at home and gave it to me, and Amy was kind enough to get it framed for us. But this is an article from 1926. Wow. one of our predecessors, the Consolidated Water Company of Utica, had talked about how they had just created an intake in the dam at the Hinckley Reservoir to begin using the new reliable water source that was going to allow Utica to experience all this growth.
How about
It's a fascinating read if you get a chance. We haven't decided, it's going to get hung in here somewhere. So if you want to take a gander at this later or, next month when you come in for the board meeting, it's a pretty interesting piece of history. So we're going to memorialize it in our museum here.
You make small copies, so.
I would imagine we probably could. We have a scanner big enough to scan it. So we might be able to do that and send it out.
That would be great.
Yeah. Or we could just get a photo. Yeah. We could just get a photo and image it. Yeah. But it's a pretty cool read, and this is an old piece of newspaper, so thought you might find it interesting. It'll get hung up here eventually. And that's all I have unless there's any questions.
Yeah, on the subject of increasing revenues, will those town and villages, once they're online, is that gonna add financial impact on?
Yeah, so we do have a project planned potentially to go east. We're waiting. Ken has been working with other attorneys to develop an intermunicipal agreement that will require the village of Herkimer to say yes or no once and for all and sign on board and commit to the project. Ilion is pretty much on board already. Frankfurt, so far, is interested in at least having a connection. In their mind, it might be a standby connection that they might not use for a few years. But once the language is finalized, then all the towns will have to decide exactly what they're going to do. Schuyler is already using our water, but has a couple new districts on a drawing board. If everybody that's interested, in fact, jumps on board and begins to buy water from us, it'll expand our customer base by about 35%. So, but no water will be flowing through that project for at least another 4 years. Probably more like 5 or a little bit longer.
Wow.
So it's a potentially a long.
Those municipalities don't sign on the dotted line.
Pardon me?
It won't flow at all if those municipalities don't sign on the dotted line.
Exactly. Now, there's work we have to do on our end to make that water available at the connection point. The work we'll do on our end is scalable based on how many of those entities say yes and how many say no. But if Herkimer, for example, says no, then the only improvements we're going to do on our end is going to match the demand from the rest. At that point, they won't be able to come back and go, we want it on board, because the water won't be available. We're not going to spend extra money and then hope at some point they come on board later on. Because the only thing we know we're not going to do is borrow money to do our side of it and then not have the revenue to pay the debt service, which would result in a rate increase on existing customers. That's off the table. So we'll see, but we should know in the next 30 to 60 days how that's going to shake out. Hopefully, right, Ken? You think that timetable is reasonable? Yeah, so good. Any other questions?
Now, if we have to shut off an apartment building, say,
Yeah.
does the responsibility of relocating them fall on us? or
No.
the owner?
No, that's what the task force is about. So
That's
city codes department will be involved if it's in Utica, as well as county social services, county health department. All of those people have to come into play, and all of that has to be figured out ahead of time so that if we have to shut the water off, we already know where they're going, how they're going to get there, et cetera, because we don't want people in those buildings becoming innocent victims and being thrown out with no place to go. So it's a lengthy process to do that. I'd prefer to get the money
Oh, yeah.
than to have to do that. But if we have to do that, or even if we have to threaten to do it, it's got to be a real threat that we're prepared to act on. So we have to have standing plans on who does what. We'll get there. Yep. Anything else?
Thanks, Pat. Any old business? Any new business? We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.